Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria Q. Kane.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Well, there has been a lot of shocking news stories since our last episode, so we are going to get into some of those today. Of course, we're on Diddy Verdict Watch, so whenever that comes out, we'll be talking about it, but not on today's episode because really nothing is happening yet. We're going to get into the plea deal with Brian Kohberger that he is apparently taking this week on his homicide conviction. And we also have a couple freak accidents involving a child that went overboard on a Disney cruise and a woman who got stuck in a clothing donation box. And then we're going to get into one of the most disturbing stories that we've ever heard about children that plan on killing their classmate. Yes, that is true. You heard me correctly. And then we'll finish the episode with a maggot-infested body at a funeral home. So let's get started with this shocking Brian Kohberger news that came kind of out of nowhere.
I was in the middle of cooking dinner last night and I just opened Instagram really quick while I was waiting for something to finish off. And then I see Cheryl made this post and was like, I've confirmed with a family member that Kohberger has made a plea deal. And I was like, there's just no way. Like, there's just absolutely no way this is true. And I just start seeing it filling in on my social media, and then I turn on the news and it's on there. I cannot believe he has made a plea deal.
You know what I'm thinking happened? And obviously, like, I have no idea what happens in the system as far as trying cases like this and stuff. But I think that he's just been throwing all this stuff out and trying to see if it would stick. One of them being like, oh, I'm autistic. I got diagnosed with autism this year. Like, you can't put me to the death penalty and all this stuff. And the judge kept on throwing away all of this stuff. And the most recent one that it seems got thrown out was that he was trying to say that there were other people involved with this murder. And the judge was like, yeah, no, we're not hearing any of that stuff because that's whatever reason they said, they're just not hearing it. And that could have been like his final thing that he was trying to throw out and see if he could get a bite on it. And since there was no way to get out of it, this is what he has to do in order to save his own life.
I'm not surprised he took the plea deal. I'm surprised they offered it to him. Because in my mind, they had a pretty solid case, so why wouldn't you try to go forward with it? Was it tax reasons? Like they didn't want to spend the money on it? Was it to spare the family of not having to hear the horrific details? Are we ever going to get those details with him making this deal?
I'm not sure, but obviously there's going to be a point where the gag order is lifted, so the family especially has a lot of the details. I don't know if they had access to the autopsy report. I'm sure they are, but everybody has had to keep quiet with all of the details of this case. So a lot of it is public information. I'm sure that a lot of it is going to get released and there's going to be thousands of episodes talking about it. You know, on one hand, I look at it like people who usually get the death penalty, most of them don't even get put to death. There's all of these appeals. It costs so much money. And that could really drag on for the family as well. Whereas I feel like right now they're not happy with this. But if he pleads tomorrow, which he's supposed to plead guilty, which he has to at this point, right? Because even though he said he was going to, technically he doesn't have to, but like, why would he do that?
Well, I think also tomorrow when they go to the hearing that the judge has to approve it. So I guess there is a possibility that the judge cannot approve it, correct? And then what happens then? Does it still go forward?
Well, I'm sure that that's all ironed out already before they release this, because now he has basically told the world that he's guilty. So if he pulls out of it or gets pulled out of it for any reason, then how are they going to find a jury when now they've told the whole world that he is guilty of doing this? We all know he's guilty. Like, I've said this from day one, just based on his eyes. Like, he's 100% guilty. But I feel bad for the family, but at the same time, like, I know that they were saying we already know the gruesome details. They possibly have already read the autopsy reports. I'm telling you right now, based upon the little that I know about it, that you never want to hear about your family member, especially your child, being butchered alive, which is what happened in these cases. And But there's a big difference between reading about the injuries and then seeing what it looks like in photographs. Obviously, in a lot of court cases, the family leaves the room when they show the autopsy pictures. I think that just showing the autopsy pictures alone in court to all of the jurors would make him guilty if there was enough evidence to back that he was the one that did it. Because I'm telling you that it is so gruesome. If you remember from the crime scene photos, that there was blood dripping outside of the house, which means to me that there was such a significant amount of blood. I mean, think about all of the layers of a house for it to leak through and be visible like that.
No, it's disgusting.
You have drywall, insulation, the outer wall, the siding, all of this stuff. It's just it was a gruesome scene. And the family for sure does not need to see any of that. Pictures getting leaked, perhaps. I mean, like right now, at least, if he goes tomorrow and says, I'm guilty, and promises that there's no appeals and he's in jail forever, the family can heal and move on from this instead of it just getting brought up. Like, look at what Lacey Peterson's mom is going through with. First, he was given the death penalty. Then they took it away. Then he was supposed to be life in prison, and now they're trying to fight that. Her daughter died such a long time ago, and she's an old woman and still dealing with this every single day instead of trying to move on with what life she's got left.
No, I understand that. I guess there was also confusion with how it was brought up to the family. So when I was watching News Nation last night, one of the reporters was saying that the family was consulted really shortly beforehand about it and everybody was against it, but it wasn't necessarily a consultation. It was more of a heads up that it was already going down. I think it first came up that it was a possibility on Friday, and then by Sunday night they got word that it was happening. So they barely had time to process it.
So, I mean, by the time this episode airs, this news hasn't even been out for 24 hours. So I'm sure that there's a lot more that's going to go down with this. And maybe we'll find out the reason. Maybe the prosecution wasn't 100% certain that they were going to be able to nail it. I just don't know. But ultimately, would you want to take the risk of him getting off?
No, I
because
think it's
that
just
would
a
be
lot
worse
for them.
for the family.
Well, I
for
think
sure.
it's a lot for them to process because in everybody's mind it was such a solid case, but maybe they just came across some discovery that could have put reasonable doubt in the jurors' minds, and they were like, you know what, let's do this because at least we'll get him. And we don't really know what went on behind the scenes right now.
Well, what's also really interesting is, and we've talked about this on this show, is that there's this whole entire population that believes that he's innocent, including someone who listens to our show and left a comment on one of our YouTube videos saying we were assholes for saying that this guy's guilty, right? So that might also worry prosecutors as well, because every normal person that's looking at this case is just like, come on, like how many things do you have to say that are blatantly obvious? I personally didn't need any of those details because, like I told you, he has creepy eyes. But besides that, there's still a population of people, a big population of people online that just don't believe it. And that has to scare prosecutors for sure.
Well, of course, I mean, any single thing on the internet, there's going to be one side or the other. There's nothing in the world that all people are going to agree on. There's even like, we would think that with something horrific like pedophilia or rape, but there are people that are into that stuff. So it's unfortunate, but this is the world we live in today. This is not going to sound right the way I'm saying it, but I was looking forward to watching the trial in the sense of seeing how they catch a person, seeing all the DNA, seeing all the evidence that led them to him, what they found at the crime scene. I hope we still get that from an investigator perspective, how that all went down in the documents. I'm sure we will at some point, because you're saying the gag order is going to have to be lifted at some point. Is that going to be like on Wednesday, or are we going to be scrambling next week to try to write this dissection for everybody?
This is what pisses me off, though, and this is why the family's pissed off. It's Brian Kohberger is still in control of their children and still in control of them.
Yes.
He's in control of all of it, and that's why the family feels like, I mean, I can't imagine with my children, like they're mine, they're my children, right? I can't imagine someone else making decisions in because for them, not me. And it's a feeling of a loss of control for the parents, but it's also a feeling of giving up that control to the person that killed them. They want all of this to come out, and in hopes that maybe this will prevent this from ever happening again, you know? So I just feel terrible for them, not to mention the fact that no one even called them and told them. They got an email with a letter attached. Who knows what the letter attached is, because I was hearing that he wrote a letter to the families or something like that. So who knows what that says?
No freaking way should they send that to them. That is not right. He
On
should
an
not
email
have,
on a Sunday night, like,
he should not have any access to talk to them directly.
yeah, and
no
I'm
matter how.
100% sure of that. But what I'm saying is that, like, it's Sunday night. You're sitting in your house. You're watching TV. You have to move on. So maybe you're having dinner. You're sitting there having ice cream. Not that your life is ever the same. And then all of a sudden you get this email out of the blue that's just like, oh, this is happening, and it's happening on July 2nd, and you have to be there. And you have to remember, like, some of these families don't live around there. They have other kids they have to deal with. They have to travel. They have to get places, and they have to be there. I mean, this is a big deal. The families have to be there, and not to even have any respect to give them at least a week's notice, like, to make arrangements. It's just, and not to mention all the other times that they had to go there for all of this stuff. The whole thing's kind of been a circus. One messed up thing that I learned today is that after all this, if he does plead guilty and everything's settled, his lawyer, who's a public defender, who we're paying for with our tax dollars, is going to make almost $1 million off of this case.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to write a book. I'm sure they're going to do everything.
She's going to write a book. I mean, I don't know what the plea deal is going to involve, what he could talk about, because he's like the ultimate. He's trying to make himself be like the ultimate crime scene investigator, forensic person, right? And he's going to be allowed to do this in jail now, that he's going to be able to talk about not only being a person that's in a PhD program and has degrees in criminology, but from the perspective of a person that committed the crime as well. And that shit sells, and I don't know.
Yeah, but he legally cannot make money off of anything
Who cares
he
about,
does.
it's
like
not
that.
the money. It's not the money. It's the fame. It's the infamy. It's the, like, he wants to be the next BTK, or he wants to be the next Ted Bundy, like the guy that everybody talks about, and he certainly is going to get that over the course of his life.
I don't necessarily have a problem with his attorney writing books and doing interviews off of it, because, I mean, she didn't choose this case. She's a public defender. Everybody has a right to an attorney. It's not like she sought him out. I'm sure she was scared out of her mind having to deal with that crazy eye dude, like, every day. And then you have to think, people can't see that she's a public defender and that this case was assigned to her, and I'm sure she's getting death threats every single day. It's not like she's gonna go on to live this amazingly baller life. She's probably gonna live in fear forever. What if he breaks out or something and goes after her?
He's definitely not breaking out. But you know what's crazy? Last night when I posted this on my Instagram stories and just was putting pictures of his crazy eyes, I get the pictures off the news and I put them, and they were on my phone, and I have to delete them because he scares the shit out of me.
Well,
and imagine her, like, having to visit him, and I know oftentimes the defense lawyers know what happened, because they'll say to their client, you need to tell me what happened and I'm going to try to get you out of it, basically.
Well,
so
she can't say what he told her, because that's attorney-client privilege. So, like, we're not going to know
does that end after it's all done?
No, I don't think so. I think anything he told her was in complete confidence. So she could probably talk about the tactics she was going to go for and, like, everything that's happened so far in the process. But I don't think legally she can say what he told her in private.
I don't really know about that, but all right. So we'll get back to this when we hear more stuff. Obviously, it's only 12 hours later, really,
like barely,
right? So hopefully we'll get more information about that. But we just wanted to talk about it because we've been talking about that case for years here in the Gross Room and on Mother Knows Death. All right. So another big story that happened this week was, you guys know that we've been talking about this dreaded cruise that we had to go on with our family, and it was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. It was just okay.
Had the whole recap. We
had the recap on last episode, but yeah. So then so now we feel like we're experts on cruise ships because we actually been on one, and to hear this story about a kid that accidentally went overboard and the dad jumping in after the kid on a Disney cruise is outrageous.
Do you find that it's bizarre that all these cruise stories are pouring in just as we went on? I feel like we've never had this many so close together. It was kind of like all the airplane stuff clustered together.
Yeah,
Once it's
it
happening,
really
it's
is
the hot
crazy.
topic.
I'm just like, all right, we heard about the poop cruise last week, and then we hear about this, and there's been other stories that are coming out too. It's just ironic, but we love to talk about it. So let's tell what happened with this Disney cruise.
So over the weekend on a Disney cruise, passengers were just going about the boat when they heard the emergency code Mr. MOB, which means man overboard. So it turns out that a child fell off of deck 4 and that her father jumped in right after her. So at first it wasn't really clear what happened and how she fell. First, I guess I'll get into they were rescued very quickly. And we'll talk about the statistics with that and everything in a little bit, but I guess at first it was really unclear how she fell in, and then NBC was reporting that some people saw the child on a railing sitting on it so the dad could take a photo of her, and then that's how she went over the edge, which I think everybody could agree is not a good idea.
But it's totally possible.
Yes.
On the cruise ship. And we have the picture we posted on Instagram of our whole family. We were in front of a similar thing that we could have sat a child up on and said, take a picture. So this is just like a dad being a dad and not doing a safe practice, but not that anybody deserves this, but clearly this is not a good idea ever. Especially do you remember the bar was like really moist all the time because of the humidity in the air? It was like wet and slippery.
Well, we're writing up cruise injuries and deaths for the gross room this week and next week, and when I started writing up the man overboard section, I was going to put a picture of Lubert versus you next to the railing to show a child, couldn't just accidentally tip over, but you're a tall person. How tall are you? Like 5'10"? You can just
5'8", 5'9".
Yeah, you could just flip right over. I mean, I'm a shorty, so I don't think I have a high possibility of it, but I could also see it happening. And I said on last episode, I was extremely critical of people falling off the boats, but now I see how it's pretty easy, especially, well, not in this case, but I could see in other cases when alcohol is involved and you're drunk and you're not paying attention, or a kid just trying to take a cool picture and she just slipped.
Yeah, it's just, and obviously it's a Disney cruise, so it's geared towards parents and children, and every parent is just like going to know what happened and how this happened, but it doesn't seem at this time that it was a problem with the boat itself. It's just more we were talking all about the ship and just how easily it is for people to get over the other side of the bars, and you can't watch the whole boat at all times, and you just have to assume that people are not going to do dumb shit, and people do dumb shit, and this is a dumb thing. And luckily, what a story to tell your family growing up after surviving something like this. I was showing Gabe the video, right? Mm-hmm. So my husband he's on the New Jersey task force, and he does swift water training because he goes to all of these hurricanes and rescues people in water situations, not the ocean ever, but similar with like North Carolina and Asheville, and just very fast, rapid rising waters. And he was just looking at the condition of the water and the boat, how it was rocking, and he's like, it is actually amazing that this father was able to tread this water for 20 minutes with a child. Like, he's just, because Gabe's just like, I obviously would have jumped in too. I wouldn't even have thought twice about it, but he's just like, that's not easy to do. And it's amazing that they got to them with only 20 minutes, but that he was able to do it, because it's hard to do with yourself because you tire out. But think about trying to hold a child up as well that doesn't have the strength to do that.
No, and in the post next week, I'm going to talk about this guy who fell in the Gulf, and he was treading water for 20 hours and survived. They got him.
Oh my God.
I'll get more into that. But surviving man overboard is not likely in most cases. So there's this data from 2009 to 2019 from Cruise Lines International Association, where they reported that there was 212 cases of people falling overboard, which is about 19 incidents per year. So of those 212 people, only 48 people survived, which is not a lot. So
it's way less. It's way less than half. So it's not good.
Yeah, they're extremely lucky that they survived. I mean, the boat stopped immediately. What they tell you to do if they see you is that, or if you see somebody overboard, is you need to immediately alert staff. If you see them and you're near one of the life buoys that's on the boat, throw it overboard, because anything that could help them float is helpful. And then they're going to alert, the boat's going to alert the Coast Guard. The boat's going to stop and try to deploy rescue boats. And then depending on the situation, they're going to look with the Coast Guard, or they can, in this case, get the people with their own rescue boat very quickly. And then they do it until they either find the person or they determine they're lost. So it's kind of nuts.
It is, and a lot of the witnesses on the boat too. I mean, when you're in the ocean, it's just such an amazing thing to just see how it just goes on forever, and it's just so large, and it doesn't end, right? But the people were saying that they were so surprised that this dad and his child looked like specks in the ocean. Like you couldn't even tell it was a person. It was so small just by looking down, just because the ocean is so large. So kudos to all involved. The Disney people really seemed like they were trained and ready for something like this to happen. And you don't want to have to go on a cruise ship that like all of the decks have plexiglass on them because they're scared somebody is going to do that again. So hopefully, I don't know. I'm sure there's signs everywhere that say not to go up there, but like humans are humans, and this is just going to forever happen, this kind of stuff.
We'll also get into a case where the plexiglass literally didn't matter either, because people just don't follow the rules. Sometimes it's good to be a rule follower, guys.
Sometimes, you know best.
All right, so last week in Florida, police got a call that someone was stuck inside of a clothing donation box, but when they got there, they found a dead woman inside.
Yeah, so this woman was, it was a nurse, I believe, or a teacher. Was it a nurse or a teacher?
A teacher came across a person that looked like they were stuck in the donation box, but they were,
it was 6 o'clock.
dead.
It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. She was probably on her way to do something, and just, you know, we all have these trash bags in our trunk full of clothes to put in the donation box that usually sit in our trunk for like 6 months before we're like, oh, there's one, let's drop it off. And there's a pretty pink one, let me stick it in there. So she goes up to there and sees a person sticking out. I mean, that's shocking, right? She didn't examine them to see if anything was going on, but the woman was clearly dead. Here they find out that she was homeless. They think that possibly, they don't know exactly what happened, but they think that it could possibly be a positional asphyxia. So that's when your body is bent in such a way that you're not able to have oxygen exchange anymore. And they think that happened because she was probably going in the box trying to find stuff and get stuff out, like clothes. So that's really sad and terrible that anybody would die in that way.
God, and I just have to imagine it's so hot down there too, and if you get stuck in there, you're just like trapped in that heat.
Yeah. I mean, if you're trapped, bent in half like that, and you can't expand your chest for respiration, that's terrible. But also just the lack of oxygen in general within that box wouldn't be great either. So just the combination of all of it is terrible. And I guess we'll hear more if we probably won't hear anything unless it was like, oh, she was murdered and stuffed in the box. But just on first examination, they think that that's what happened.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Like we said, this week and next week's high profile death dissection are all about injuries on cruise ships and deaths and all sorts of diseases you could pick up, including parasitic infections, which is just the worst thing ever that could happen to people. We also have every month in the Gross Room, we have a monthly giveaway where we give away yearly memberships, merch from our store, and we give a $200 gift card to a member every month too. So if you want to just join and check it out just for a month and see if you like it, which you will love it, you could also enter for a chance to win a year membership.
Yeah, head over to thegrossroom.com now to sign up.
All right, so this is another news story that came out recently about kids who were seriously planning to kill another child.
So 4 fifth grade girls aged 10 to 11, which also surprised me that it was girls, allegedly plotted to kill a classmate by stabbing him in the school bathroom and staging it to look like a suicide, and they were going to put a forged suicide note out at recess.
So the whole entire plan, I guess, was overheard by kids who told their parents, who called the school, but it was a very intricate plan that included one child luring the kid into the bathroom, one child stabbing the kid, one child looking out. Like it's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. They actually said that they were planning on using gloves so they didn't leave fingerprints on
It's
the
just
weapon.
crazy that they're so young and they have these assigned roles basically. Like this was that mapped out.
Well, they're getting it from somewhere, right? I mean,
Well,
kids do not come up with this shit on their own.
I don't know because when they searched them and figured out the plan, and then when the school talked to them, they said 3 of the girls showed remorse, but one of them thought it was funny and was smiling. So I assume that was the mastermind of the plan because that's not normal behavior for a young girl.
Yeah, and I think it's hard when girls are in. I mean, I have a child that's in 5th grade who's a girl. I can't even imagine something like this going down, but you see with different circumstances that kids bring up an idea and then their other friends go along with it cuz kids don't want to go against what they think, especially with the cool kids saying or whatever. Um it's so shocking to me, but this is something that all parents that are that are my age or younger that have children that are growing up right now have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with when we were kids. And it's because of social media and just the access to things that they have. They know about things that they shouldn't know about. When we were kids, it was like, okay, we would maybe stumble across TV shows or something and hear about cases or see it in the newspaper, but it's just different now because of YouTube and these short videos and these, true crime's a huge thing. And when the kids are watching YouTube, that stuff is not filtered out to them. And you could say, oh, there's YouTube Kids and stuff. It's just like, listen, no 10 to 15-year-old wants to watch YouTube Kids. It's a bunch of Coco Melon videos and shit. They want to see things that are interesting to them. And unfortunately, it's like you have YouTube Kids, which is like Barney videos, and then the full World Wide Web that with access to everything. There's no in between.
Well, even when we post these videos on our YouTube channel, one of the questions that's a mandatory prompt before you publish is this video for kids?
They don't give a shit.
Yeah, but
I
that's
see
what
videos all the time that my kids
this
should
is
not
what I'm
be
saying.
seeing.
If I click yes, it is for kids, is there a person manually reviewing it, or does it just go live for children until it's reported otherwise?
I have several children come to my house and say that our reels show up in their feed.
Well,
So-
they're not on
and-
the kids because I've never marked it as safe for kids.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying though. Like that doesn't even matter at all. And listen, there's thousands of articles and stories from parents that'll just be like, "Oh, I was sitting there watching YouTube with my kid, and this video came up, and this video came up," and it's just like the only way to prevent it is to not let your kid go on it. And I don't know if I don't know if that's actually practical or if it's a good idea to withhold things like that from them and not teach them how to navigate it because it is the world that we live in.
Well, this really reminds me of the Slender Man case where I think this was the first time we really saw this horrible impact on children just having free reign of the internet and going on creepypasta and seeing this mythical creature that was saying it was okay to kill, right? And they ended up stabbing that girl and thankfully she survived. I mean, what if they executed this plan? I'm kind of bothered that I know they're little kids, but they were only charged with misdemeanors and they're suspended pending expulsion, but like, is this the only trouble they're getting in? Do they have to go to mandated therapy? This is really concerning behavior for little kids.
It is. And you know what though? Like their brains are not formed even a little bit. It's just like you can't they're literally like repeating something that they think sounded cool. I just don't think I don't know. I'm not a psychologist and stuff, and I'm sure people like Brian Kohberger were screwed up their whole life and were the first sign of someone coming out as a sociopath doesn't happen when they're in their 20s or 30s, right? But it has to start somewhere, and maybe one of the children that were not remorseful has something going on that might come out worse later when they're older, but just a lot of it is just like I'm not 100% sure. It's the same thing as explaining to my kids about getting hit by a car. They don't really understand what happens when you get hit by a car. They think it's like a ball and it's going to bounce off and it'll like hurt like when you fall off your bike. They just don't understand that like your body's going to get smeared along the sidewalk and do you know what I'm saying? Like they don't know, and that's why kids get hurt all the time doing dumb shit because they just don't really understand the full ramification of things. And kids just do other stuff all the time and get in trouble because they just really don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, another point I wanted to bring up was of course, the question is why were they planning to kill this boy? And they're saying it's because he cheated in a relationship. Why are so many people like this is a problem I've noticed lately. It's just so many people are like talking about little kids like, "Oh, they have a boyfriend, they have a girlfriend." Like, stop it. They're kids.
I understand that, but like that's I mean, even when I was in school in the 80s, it was like it started in like 3rd grade, like, "Oh, he has a crush on you and this and that." Like kids are just going to be kids and this is when all their hormones are kicking in and stuff, and I noticed this with my 10-year-old that there's a lot of drama associated with the like change between being a child and then being a teenager, and with all of the girls and the boys too, that because they just don't know what these feelings they're experiencing and things like that. And I think that there's a certain part of that. You could look at movies from the 50s that display this cute little relationships between children.
But does
and
that make it right?
No,
I mean, the girls even
it's
come.
not real. Like it's just not real though. Okay, that he likes this person and likes this person.
Yeah, but
They
it's
don't even know.
causing real drama. Like the girls come home from school when they're giving us their daily drama unload that's like childhood nonsense that we have to listen to. They'll be like, so and so got married to so and so, but he wants to marry so and so, and I'm like, why is this causing real drama in your life over these mythical relationships?
This is the thing when you're a parent. Listen, if I had a choice, I'd be like, my kids aren't dating until they're 25 years old. Really, because their brains will be more developed. They'll be able to handle it more. They won't get their heart broken as much, whatever. I want them to be like full established women before they start dating, right? But like reality is what reality is, and you need to teach them how to navigate what's happening in reality. Like, listen, there's every single parent of kids that are in these grades can talk about little love stories that their kids have, and nobody's talking about murdering a child. So it's like this is just like a weird one-off thing, and
no, I
or
agree
maybe
with
not
that.
one-off, but super rare. And
I agree with that. It just made me want to make a topic that it's a behavior I've noticed a lot, where people talk about little kids having active boyfriend and girlfriends. And
yeah, I mean,
I think it's bizarre.
I don't push it for sure because parents could push anything on their kids and have it be okay, right? I don't sit there and be like, oh, so who do you think is hot in your class? And this, like I'm not, but I also don't want to be that parent that's like, you're not allowed to date because all kids do is do that shit behind your back. Like if you were like a slimy kid like I was, like you would just, my mom said not to watch MTV. So what did I do? I watched MTV all day at my friend's house. Like it's the same shit with YouTube. Like you can't, if you tell them that they can't have it ever, it's more about like monitoring it a little bit more. Like my approach is just let them on it a little bit. They only could be on it X amount of hours a day instead of free range. I'm trying to be in the middle a little bit, but those couple hours that they're on it, trust me, they're seeing shit that I don't want them to see. You know,
that's inevitable. And I think if you have a middle ground, like you're saying, give them a little exposure, like you let them live your life, but they also have an understanding that that's not acceptable behavior. That's like what you have to do. Because I had a friend growing up that's parents were like never let her do anything, they never let her leave, and then the second she got older, she went crazy. So like,
yeah.
you have that happen on one end, or you have your kids who are, 8 years old having TikTok on another end. So I think the middle ground is where we need to meet. I just wanted to take that as a time to talk about how I noticed this is a trending thing lately. All right, let's move on to our last story. So, back in 2022, a 24-year-old died in a car accident, and when his family attended his viewing a week later, his body was covered in maggots at the funeral home. So, obviously, this is not something that's normal.
No, it's not. And especially in a case like this. So, this is something that could happen if you ever hear, like, oh, they found a body in the river or something like that. Well, that person has been dead for a while, maybe. And that would be a reason why you would see the body can decompose. And there's oftentimes that funeral homes get decomposed bodies, to which they will say to the family, like, we highly, highly, highly advise that you do not have an open casket. And in fact, some funeral homes will say, we're not doing an open casket because they can't make the person not look green and bloated anymore and take away all of the things that are happening when a person decomposes. And once decomposition starts happening, you could still slow it down with embalming and stuff, but like it's already in motion. So it's just going to continue to start happening. So in this case, it's very weird because, and that's why I was really specific on looking at the lawsuit and seeing the times. The guy died in a car accident, which means that, and according to the lawsuit too, he died on this day and they called the funeral home the day the guy died. So if someone dies, drops dead, however they die, and they go to the funeral home that day, their body should automatically be put into refrigeration or should be embalmed immediately. And if that's not happening, then the person's going to start decomposing. And that's what happened in this case. I don't know where the lapse of time was, but there was a whole entire 7 days before the person died and the viewing happened. And in those 7 days, in order to decompose to the point where there's maggot activity, the body was clearly not in proper refrigeration and not embalmed in a timely fashion. Because even if you put the body, person dies in a car accident, you put them in the refrigerator, they're not going to develop maggots in those in 7 days. It's not going to happen. So the only way that it happened was that the person wasn't put into refrigeration. And I mean, think about the shock of going to your loved one who died tragically in a car accident, so an unexpected death, and then going to the funeral and seeing maggots come out of their nose and their ears. Like,
Well,
that's
yeah.
so disturbing. They should 100% sue this funeral home for that.
Well, then, according to the family, somebody had screamed when they saw the guy in this casket, and then they were like, stop making a scene, the funeral home. Okay, that's an incredibly disturbing thing to see.
I can't even imagine it. Do you think that the person at the funeral home thought that, I mean, listen, like, no one at the funeral home should ever be telling a family not to cause a scene for anything, because people
Grieve in different ways.
They grieve in different ways, and they have sometimes people have a very emotional response to seeing, their kid dead in a casket, right? Like, so
Yeah,
even if she was just screaming just because she was upset, you should never be telling a person when you're the employee to, like, not cause a scene. That's weird.
Yeah, because this is not the first time somebody screamed at a funeral home. I mean, it's not like a 95-year-old man that lived a fulfilling life and he died peacefully in his sleep. This is a person in their 20s that died tragically already, and that could be a horrific sight in itself, seeing a properly embalmed person laying in a casket, and then on top of it, you see your loved one with bugs crawling all over their face. It's disgusting.
Yeah, so I think it was the mother in the lawsuit did mention that when she went to the viewing that the room seemed to be very warm, which really it shouldn't ever be warm, even if the body has been properly refrigerated and embalmed. But if it was, the maggots don't happen right away. Like, a fly has to first land on the dead tissue, which they're attracted to because of the decomposition. And then the eggs have to hatch. It's a process. It's not something that just happened 5 minutes prior to that viewing. So we've heard cases like this before of where people are not put in a proper refrigeration, and that's what happens. I actually had an autopsy once of the only pregnant person autopsy I did, and the woman had died at a hospital in Philadelphia. And we were doing the autopsy at another hospital in Philadelphia. And there was a time where she left the one hospital and went to the funeral home and was there for 12 hours, but it was in the middle of the dead hot summer heat wave in Philadelphia. And by the time she got to us, she was decomposed. And I'm just like, if she died at the hospital, went to the funeral home, went in the fridge, and then came to us and went went in our fridge, there's absolutely no way that she was green and bloated at that point. So they did not put her in refrigeration, which was a problem for our autopsy findings, honestly. And that's like a whole other story. But we've had stories on Mother Knows Death of people not properly putting bodies into the refrigerator at a funeral home, and that's what happens.
All right, let's move on to questions of the day. Every Friday at the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram account, you guys can head to our story and ask whatever you want. Can you explain how amniotic fluid embolism is a diagnosis of exclusion? Is there no clear sign that was the cause of death?
So that's a really interesting thing. We wrote about this. We did a celebrity death dissection on Nurse Hallie that was at RN New Grads. I'm sure lots of you who are in the medical field were following her on her social media. And this was her cause of death. So we did that pretty recently. But it's a very so an amniotic embolism is when somehow the fetal tissue gets into the maternal circulation and causes a reaction and causes a mother to die shortly after, either during childbirth, shortly after childbirth. And it's a very rare thing that happens, but it happens, and it cannot really be predicted. There's some risk factors that you should take into consideration, but it's just something that kind of has to be dealt with if it happens. So back in the day, they would say that an amniotic fluid embolism could only be diagnosed at autopsy, and it would be at looking at lung tissue under the microscope, and there you would see fetal cells within the maternal circulation. But that's not really the case anymore to say 100% that that's an amniotic embolism, because there have been cases where they've done autopsies and they've seen tissue that they could prove that there are fetal cells circulating in the maternal circulation of people who have absolutely no complications with childbirth. So that in itself is okay. Yes, maybe they had this, but it doesn't prove 100% that that's what killed them. It's called an amniotic fluid embolism, and the word embolism means that cells or tissue or whatever occurs in one part of the body and it travels to another part of the body. They're starting to think that an amniotic fluid embolism probably isn't the proper terminology, and they're thinking that it has to do with those cells getting into the maternal circulation, but the body actually having like an allergic reaction to those cells. So that only happens in some people, and they're not really sure why that happens. But the presentation is more of what would happen if a person has a severe anaphylactic reaction, like if they got stung by a bee or something, rather than symptoms that you would see with a true embolism. So when they say it's exclusionary, it means that they looked at all of the other things that it could have been, and they said, okay, it definitely can't be this. And at autopsy, we see pulmonary edema, and we see the cells in the maternal circulation, and we see hemorrhage. Then with all that, they could say, okay, it was an amniotic embolism was the cause of death.
All right, 2. Nicole, what's with parasites and cleanses? Did you ever find parasites during an autopsy?
No, I cannot stand that shit. Like, parasites are, I will say this, in this country, it is rare to get parasites. When you see it in this country, a lot of times, it's like, it really is when people travel. I mean, you see them from time to time, but like, I've seen a couple parasitic infections working in a large city hospital for years. And the only time I saw it was in cytology specimens that would come down before I was even a PA. I've never seen it in an autopsy ever, that people, that like all of these videos are claiming that there's these parasite cleanses and stuff. It's just not true. And what are these people's backgrounds that are even showing this? Like, listen.
It's like fake wellness influencers who eat clean and do parasite cleanses, but then put all this Botox and filler in their face.
But some of them are showing pictures of the shit that they say is coming out. And it's like, that's not even what a parasite looks like. It looks like it's like sloughed off mucosa or the lining of the bowel in some cases. But like, when you see parasitic worms, they look like worms. They don't look like little stringy things or whatever. And I like personally, I just think that and like anybody that I've ever talked to all thinks that this is just complete bullshit. Now, I'll tell you, in the grocery room, I have some nasty, nasty cases of parasitic infections, and all of them, really, I would say probably 99% of these cases are all from other countries where there's not plumbing, like things like that, where people are shitting out in public and then they're eating from the soil with the shit in it, and they're just transferring disease all over the place. It's just not happening where there's plumbing and there's healthcare and everything. It's just not happening as often. Not to say that it can't, because it does certainly happen in America, but like the average person that's just going about their day and stuff is not having a parasitic infection. Listen, you would know if you had a parasitic
Where
infection.
are these people getting these capsules that have the parasites in them to take them from? Like strange websites on the internet?
What are
When
you talking?
these influencers are doing these parasitic cleanses, where are they getting them from?
Well, it's just, I don't even know. It's just like some kind of herbs and stuff that they're saying are cleansing the parasites. There's a whole other thing, and I don't know if that's what you're talking about, that people actually take parasites to lose weight.
No, that's what I'm talking about. People who are taking capsules with parasites in them because
Well,
they think
that's
it's
like a
beneficial
different.
to your health or losing weight.
No, that's like a whole different thing. The cleanse is like telling people, if you take this herbal supplement, which probably has like senna or something in it that that they give you whenever you need to, like a laxative effect, right? It'll, like, you could take a laxative and cleanse yourself out if you really want to, right? If you really think that you have parasites and stuff, you could do that. But these ones are labeled parasite cleanse, but like it doesn't have anything in it that's different than anything else. But sometimes people take supplements that are like tapeworm to lose weight. You could get them on the internet somewhere. Like
No, that's what I was thinking this whole time we were talking about was these people that are taking the parasites themselves.
The cleanse is to just like you thinking that like you listening to these influencers that all have parasites, and if you take this, you'll get rid of your parasites too. And then the other one is intentionally ingesting parasites so you could lose weight.
No, that's what I'm talking about with the influencers is that they're pushing taking parasites to cleanse their body and lose weight.
I know there's some of them that are doing that too, but that's not what the typical parasite cleanse is considered. Like there's influencers that take these parasite cleanses and show like pictures of their shit and say like, look at all these worms that were inside of me, and you're like, that's not worms. But okay, like, but I mean, they go viral, and people, it's a big business. But I mean, you do you get it if you want, but like, you don't need to go take adult collects or something.
All right, last question is for me. Given everything we know, were you a MySpace scene queen or more emo, and did you go to Warped Tour? I wanted to be a scene queen, but I was too ugly. So I
just stop.
I'm joking. I was obsessed with Audrey Kitching, Raquel Reed, Jack Vanek, all of them. I had all their bracelets. Of course, I went to Warped Tour because that's where I had to buy the bracelets. I had these amazing Jeffree Star ones. I had the coolest Jeffree Star hoodie ever. Yeah, of course I went to Warped Tour. It was my first concert ever. You brought me for the first time when I was 11, and it just kind of went from there.
I think that, like, since I was with Maria during this whole phase, which was terrible, by the way, I think the scene queen, like, any kind of these looks that you commit to are a lot of work. Like, do you ever watch a person that's like, there's all these videos that show now like a really goth person that they get a makeover and it makes them look like, you know, they have
like
blonde
a
hair.
normie.
Yeah, like a normie, right? When I look at these, in particular, like a goth person like that or something, I'm like, that's a lot of maintenance every day. And me and Maria, well, I am a fairly low maintenance person as far as like, I don't go get my hair done all the time. I get it cut once a year. I don't dye my hair. Like, I don't wear makeup if I don't have to. The only maintenance I do is like getting my nails done every 3 weeks, right? Like, I don't want to get dressed up every day. When you're a scene queen, it was just like, wasn't it like the really hot pink hair and the crazy eyeliner and the crazy makeup and the full outfit? It's just like a lot every day to commit to something like that.
It was like extremely teased out hair with like long extensions called coon tails where you would like dye it to look like raccoon. And then you had to wear the crazy winged eyeliner and bows and Hello Kitty barrettes. Like it was,
There was
I
lots
agree
of
with you.
bracelet. Like it's just like too much to do every day before you need to go to school. And like I know a lot of people like look at people there, and there's all sorts of things. There's like the emo scene queens and the goth people. There's like whole groups of people, but I always look at those people and I'm like, damn, like that's like dedication. It's a lot of work to do that every single day. And I just don't. Like I'm just too lazy. Like I just want to walk around in like flip flops and a t-shirt every day and like get dressed up on occasion. And I feel like Maria was the same way. Like I'm just kind of like, you want to wake up an hour and a half before school every day to like do your hair and makeup so you could like look like this every day. It's just a lot.
Listen, I tried. It just wasn't for me. I was obsessed with the look. It just wasn't happening. I eventually settled on having you dye strips of red in my hair, and then I wore My Chemical Romance t-shirts and kind of settled it there. But I don't know if I've talked about this. I had this like pivotal point in my childhood where you were like, you could get this Build-A-Bear or you could get this t-shirt that says I love boys who wear eyeliner. And that's when I was like, am I growing up today or what? It was from Torrid. I'll never forget that day. It was like so funny. It's so stupid.
Yeah, but that was like 100% of the scene of like what you were into. And I don't know. It's just like far from what I was into, but Maria was full on in it, and I tried to support her in it by taking her to like.
Well, you took me to Warped Tour in 2006, which was my first concert ever, and that's like where I got introduced. I was already into a lot of the music at that point, but that's where I got introduced to like Thursday, the Casualties, like a bunch of ska bands and stuff. So that was a really cool experience. And then I went every year throughout my teens, basically. My dream when I was a teenager was to be a photographer on the Warped Tour, which upon reflection and my husband having worked at a music venue would have been a horrible idea because young girls like me get preyed on by these predators and these bands. So probably would have been a horrible choice, but it worked out.
You would have liked it at the time.
That's what I said, because I'll be talking about a band I like, and Ricky's like, that guy's a scumbag. He was banging 16-year-olds in the back of the venue I worked at. And I'm like, yeah, but I would have thought that was the coolest thing ever.
But I would have been one of them, and that would have been amazing. I would have thought I was special.
Exactly. So upon reflection, it's probably better it didn't work out that way, but that was most of my youth, shooting shows every single weekend, and Warped Tour was definitely a large part of that. All right, well, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to buy tickets for our Atlanta meet and greet and the Crime and Wine.
And did you say that you were going? Because
I don't think I even said I was going. Originally, I didn't think I could go to Atlanta, but just in the last week or two, I am now going. So I will also be there at the meet and greet and the Crime and Wine. So tickets for that you could buy in the description of this episode in the Gross Room or on our social media. Head over to Apple or Spotify. Please leave us a nice review or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have a story for us, please submit it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com.
Well, don't forget to mention that we're going to have books for sale.
Yeah, we're going to have books for sale.
That I'll sign for you. So,
and maybe some special vouchers for the Gross Room. So.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see you guys soon.
See ya. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.